Well, we, on a Thursday, it happened on a Thursday, and on a Thursday, our Goose Hill gang, it's about 11 of us that go out every single Thursday. We meet on at noontime, we have lunch,
Right.
we shoot the bull for an hour and a half, and then some of us go in one direction, some go in another direction. And when this happened, we're in Wendy's having a hamburger. And there
The lights went out in Wendy's?
Yeah. No, the lights were on.
Oh, the lights were on.
Lights
What
were
was
on
your
in
immediate
Wendy's.
reaction when this happened?
And we looked across the street, and then of course we got the news,
Right.
and then we saw across the street there people who wanted to get gas. They couldn't.
So you found out the news before you knew?
Yes.
Okay, so there was no immediate reaction.
No.
Okay, so you weren't thinking. Some people were thinking
Yeah,
that
that's
there were
right.
terrorist attacks or
Yeah.
so on. So.
I can't understand, John, though, that, it happened in 1965,
Right.
and it happened in 1977, and to this day, I would assume that everything was put in place, all the transmission lines and whatever else had to be put in place to protect each and every, city.
Right.
And
that happened
I was
a
shocked
long way, right? That went along all the East Coast into Canada.
Into Canada.
Into Canada as well.
And we heard on the news that Canada and all New York City and every place else, were out of power, including Schenectady. We couldn't believe it.
Yeah,
I
that
couldn't
was
believe
amazing.
it.
We thought it was just a building.
And you know what's sad, John, is that you can imagine what our enemies are thinking about.
Right.
Imagine what they could do to us if we don't take and do something about protecting.
So do you know exactly what happened? I mean, I know you're not the
No, we
answer
don't.
here. We don't know, right?
No.
Okay, so
At least they haven't publicized it.
they haven't publicized it. So something blew up, or we have no clue yet?
No
or?
clue whatsoever. They talked about lightning. They talked about power outage at Niagara Falls, but nothing has been firmed up.
And what do you think?
I personally think the system itself fell apart, and that's sad because
That shouldn't have happened.
In this day and age, it shouldn't have happened.
Someone being negligent, maybe?
That could be.
You think it's
Could be, but and of course that happens. But I think when all of the brain power that we have in this country,
right,
in all the subject matters, you'd think after the '65 and the '77 incident that they would have got together and put together a plan and an operation that would safeguard every single city in New York State. But that's not the case.
And it was outside of New York State.
And even outside
How
of New
can
York State.
it was one piece of equipment, or?
That's what they were talking about, but I don't know. I think it's more than that.
I mean, how would that knock off all the places?
It's sad. Very, very sad. You talk in terms of food, you're talking in terms of medicine, you're talking in terms of computers and everything else, and everything's, electrically controlled today.
Right.
And
it's something we depend on.
Oh, sure, you have to have it.
Yeah.
You have to have it.
I mean, sometimes our phone goes off for an hour and we're
right.
It's a big deal.
That's
so,
right.
That
right.
I'm sure was a big deal.
That's exactly right.
So what do you think could have been done to prevent it? Do you
Well,
have an opinion
I think
on
the
that?
only thing I think that could have been done to prevent that is that, again, not to be repetitive about the '77, that was the most recent incident, that everybody would have got together and all the brain power and put together a plan that was foolproof, that could not be tampered with.
And for those of us who don't know what happened in '77, I wasn't exactly here in '77.
Yeah, the power was out. The power was out.
What happened?
Not as bad as
this time?
as now, but it was bad.
And the power went out where?
In various cities in New York State. Yeah.
New York State?
Yeah.
And how long did your power go out?
Ours was out for about 4 hours.
4 hours?
Yeah.
So it wasn't
It wasn't
bad.
no, it wasn't bad.
And all those people in New York City that were trapped?
Oh, that was sad there. Trapped in
train.
the elevators and everything.
Oh, my God. Could you imagine being trapped in an
Oh,
elevator?
dear.
That would be a nightmare.
Oh, dear.
Not knowing
that was
what's
awful.
happening.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, when are you going to run for public office?
For me, I'm not getting involved in politics.
You wouldn't? Well,
Do I look like I would get involved in
Well,
politics?
you like people, don't you?
Yes, I like people, but
You get along with people.
I
You've
get
been
along
on this
with
program
people.
for 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So ever since you were a teenager, so that's doing good. It's a good start.
Yeah, it is. I unfortunately I haven't came to my interest yet.
What do you think about?
I'm more interested in interviewing you.
Well, what do you think about the parking garage episode that's going on?
Tell me. I don't know what's going on.
Do you have any points of view on that? Any opinions?
I don't know what's going on. What's going on?
Well,
I'm supposed to be interviewing you. No.
Okay.
So this is downtown. This is happening downtown? Yeah. They actually built a parking garage in downtown, right?
Yeah, in the 80s.
In the 80s?
I was a city councilman at that time.
Okay.
And a Broadway Center, was being considered for construction.
Right.
And they needed a parking garage. And my point of view as a councilman was to have Broadway Center, the private sector, construct a parking garage, because I had the experience 1971 through 1983 when I was mayor, from going to city to city, and every city that owned a parking garage also had a deficit, a serious deficit. So I made that point, in the 80s when I was a city councilman. I said, taxpayers should not be financing private sector business. Parking garages are private sector business. If the private sector, like Broadway Center, was to construct it, and they had a deficit, they could write it off. But you, the taxpayer, cannot write off a deficit. You're stuck with it. See?
We're stuck with paying.
In other words, you're stuck for paying. And that's why they have this deficit, see? And that's why it's so...
Do you think there should be some kind of vote
within
the public?
I think it's very important, you talk about people and you talk about their government. That's what must be considered before a major decision is made. Right. That's going to involve multi-millions of dollars. You have to say to yourself, what's the impact of this? Is it true that we might experience some deficit? If so, should we pursue that, or should we maybe let the private sector do it, see? If that decision was made, in those days in the 80s, we would not be in any trouble today.
Okay.
But it
so
wasn't.
We are in trouble today.
But we are in trouble.
Why?
Well, I hope a lot of lessons have been learned.
Right.
And I hope the younger people, as, the years come and go and they get elected, they stop to think that once you get elected, John, you forget that you're a Democrat or a Republican and you're there to work for the people.
Right. And how did you make the decision to be a Republican?
Oh, okay. When my wife wanted me to be a committee person, I didn't even know what a committee person was all about.
Right.
She was the one, because I wasn't a Democrat or a Republican then.
Right. And
she says, you have to enroll. I said, well, what am I going to enroll in? She says, Republican. So I became Republican.
Oh, so you
that's why I started.
She made the decision.
She made the decision for me.
Who wears the pants?
Huh?
Who wore the pants?
She did part-time. Part-time.
Except when the real important.
Right,
then you put your foot down, right, Frank?
God rest her soul. She was a very smart, intelligent person.
And what was her name once again?
Betty.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. She was pretty well known around here as well, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, she passed away in 1984, and then I got married about 4 years later again.
4 years later.
Yeah, and I've got a nice wife. She just went through a hip replacement.
Is she involved in politics as well?
She doesn't like politics at all. It's quite the opposite.
Quite the opposite.
My first wife loved it.
Well, it's kind of good because you go home and get away from it.
Yeah, that's right.
Sometimes you need a break from what you do all the time.
Yeah.
It's like. Like a lot of the celebrities, they don't want to go out wearing makeup. They're constantly wearing makeup for their job. So.
To each his own, that's what you say.
Like when you go home, you're not wearing makeup like you are now, right?
No, that's right. Wish I could maybe transplant some of your hair on my head.
Leave the hair alone.